Hi, it's Richard and Craig here with our first video for this run of Maintaining a Mindful Life. For anybody who's new to this course and new to these videos, each week we make a feedback video just drawing together sort of the main themes that have come up in all the discussion topics, discussion forums. So thanks for everybody who's been contributing there, making comments, asking questions. We've already got a really robust conversation happening and certainly one of the highlights of this course.
Yeah, it's great to be with everybody and so many learners from so many parts of the world and so many different perspectives. It's fantastic and really active discussions this week. So let's launch into them. So Richard, people are finding the comma really helpful.
Yeah, the comma and the informal practice, they're both such easy entry points into the world of mindfulness practice, Craig. And, to start with 1 minute a day, is doable for most people, right? To put aside 1 minute a day to do a little bit of meditation.
Enough to do. No,
Yeah, exactly. And of course, that comma, like a lot of our learners are discovering, can be woven in throughout the day. There are lots of different, opportunities throughout the day. Maybe we're just waiting for a kettle to boil, or maybe if you're not in stage 4 lockdown in Melbourne, Australia, you're waiting for a bus, or there's lots of opportunities just to stop for a minute. It's only a minute, and and a lot of people are noticing it's really great just to take a break from all that thinking and all that doing, just to stop for a moment and be, and then get into the next task. And of course, as we encourage people to do, the more learners punctuate their day with those little moments of mindfulness, the more mindfulness they generally tend to experience.
Yeah, and very often when we start, we think, have to have a 5-minute or a 10-minute or a 20-minute meditation practice to come into the present moment. But it actually takes no time to come into the present moment. It's like an instantaneous in the moment thing. And if we practice those regular commas, then that ability to come into the moment really can happen in a shorter space of time. Stepping up, and it's like an instantaneous thing of being able to do that. So the frequency of the practice makes it easier and easier to come into the present moment.
Yeah, as does the informal practice. Sorry. As does the informal practice, just bringing that same quality of mindfulness to everything that we do. And of course, that makes us more mindful. So we're cultivating something very useful. We're not sort of feeding the default mode and all of the sort of negative thinking that goes with that. But it also just, and some of our learners are noticing this, it just helps to increase a sense of appreciation for the moment. They're enjoying. Lots of learners saying they're sort of enjoying their activities more, whatever they're doing. So it's great to read, and it's a really nice start.
Yeah, with some of the meditation practices and Sherelle's mindful moments, and finding the train metaphor very useful. And the thing about using a kind of a metaphor like the trains of thought and not getting onto the trains, it's not so that we're sitting down meditating, thinking about trains. It's just a way of helping us to understand that we actually have a choice about whether or not we get onto that train of thought. Because the thoughts come and go, but unless we're, in a sense, mindful, we kind of think any old train of thought comes into the mind, we have to go with it. And so that's a really helpful thing. The metaphor, I guess, helps to understand that there is that choice if we're in the moment. The mindful listening side of things has been really important for lots of reasons, and the listening meditation practice, and realizing that you don't have to label the thoughts, just hearing the sounds. It's like cutting through the default mode and just hearing the sounds, connecting with the listening. And it's a very useful practice. And a lot of the poison that pours in our ear, like Hamlet, we won't get too Shakespearean here, but the poison that pours in our ear most of the time is the negativity and commentary and criticizing and judging that we're often listening to. But the mind often does label, and a number of learners have noticed that the mind does label things and so on, but we're just noticing mind labeling, and we don't have to react to that. But one of the things that has been noticed, that it's easy to listen to the pleasant sounds, sound of rain or birds and so on. But, like it's black belt mindfulness right there when, the unpleasant sounds, the partner snoring or somebody coughing. And even then we're practicing mindfulness. We're noticing the sound, but the reaction to the sound, a kind of a reactivity to it, a kind of an internal thinking. Why don't they stop? Why don't they roll over or something? And so it's still an opportunity to practice, but it's a lot harder practicing with sounds that are harsh, because we notice the mental, emotional, physical reactivity and elaboration on it. And that doesn't mean that it's not a useful practice. It just means that it's a more challenging practice. And to cultivate mindfulness there is a very, very useful thing to do.
Definitely, Craig.
Yeah. And also when there's not much to listen to, that's a lot more difficult as well in a way. And again, that's a useful practice. But the quiet, and then that's one of the things I think about the middle of the night too, is that there's relatively little for the attention to go to. And so that's often when the mind takes off and so on. And again, it's more challenging, but in times of quiet, even practicing listening is, I think, one of the really useful practices to utilize.
Yeah, listening to the quiet, enjoying that.
Silence.
Down to silence. And Craig, I've really loved reading this week in the summary that a lot of our learners now are intuitively and already applying the meditation to their relationships. That a lot of people have already made the link that, so that listening that we cultivate in the mindfulness meditation, where we're learning to listen without judgment and hear what's not being said, so to speak, we can immediately apply that in relationships, so that we start to just notice perhaps that as we're listening to someone, those judgments and evaluations are all kind of there. And then rather than listening to them, so to speak, we keep our attention on the person.
Yeah.
And so, and again, just like it's relatively harder to listen to snoring and car alarms and noises like that than it is, bird song and waterfalls and unicorns. It's harder sometimes to listen mindfully when somebody is predictable or boring, or things like that, or when they chat endlessly at you. And that's really interesting, I think, because, first of all, there are already some labels and judgments woven in there. If someone's boring and predictable, is that actually what's happening? Is that actually maybe just a judgment that we have about that person? And if it's the latter, could we let go of that and just bring our attention to what they're actually saying, and might that transform the experience?
Because very often our own mind has gone into a predictable and oftentimes boring dialogue with ourselves. It's just like press the button, play, and the mind starts going down a well-worn path of criticizing or judging and so on. And and in a way, the challenges with listening, because certain situations are easier and some are harder. And that doesn't mean that the harder ones are less useful because they're less comfortable. In fact, in some ways, they're more useful. But learning to be mindful with the stuff we find uncomfortable or not so easy is really important, especially from a mental health point of view. Because we're mindful, we might have thoughts and feelings, emotions and so on that are sometimes quite uncomfortable. And but we can learn to be with them in a different way.
Definitely, yeah, it's definitely true.
Yeah. So questions around listening all the time. Do we really need to listen all the time? Well, perhaps, yes, in a sense, listen. But sometimes when we're listening, we're just kind of listening. And then all of a sudden something, significant or more significant or important comes up, and there's a kind of an alerting where the attention engages in a different way. And it doesn't mean that we're not listening normally, but sometimes we notice something more important. It's like if you're looking for something, it's just kind of looking, and then all of a sudden you see something important and your attention goes to it. And it can be like that in conversations as well. Just listening, even if somebody's not talking about something that's perhaps that significant, but then all of a sudden you pick up a cue. And if we're paying attention, we'll pick up a cue about somebody's got a significant concern or a worry or something else, and we can respond to it if we're mindful. If we're not mindful, it's just gone right past us and we didn't even pick it up.
And let's be honest, Craig, we're always listening to something, whether that's the person talking or this incessant mental chatter. So probably when we think about it like that, it might make a little bit of sense to actually listen to what's really going on instead of all the mind's projections. That might actually make us a little bit happier in the end.
Yes. There was some questions too about taking notes, perhaps in a meeting or lecture or seminar or something like that. And so is that it's not multitasking because they're two related tasks. You're listening, you're synthesizing something, especially if we're writing down notes and we're synthesizing it, writing down. They're two aspects of one task, so it's not actually multitasking. But when we're taking notes, we're not listening in the same way as if we're just listening. Now, I often suggest drawing a distinction between, if you really want a concept, if you want the big picture, if you want understanding, then just listen. If it's detail that you need, 5 points, 1, 2, 3, and you need to jot down those 5 points, and then, maybe write down. And it can depend a little bit on what context you're in. And even just a subtle nuance as well. If people are typing notes compared to writing notes, when the people were tested, they understood a lot more and remembered more when they were writing notes rather than typing notes, because people can type sort of verbatim more quickly, but if you're writing, you've got to actually process the words and try and distill them down. So you're actually interacting with the content more. But anyway, it's important perhaps, when you're in a meeting or somewhere else, to consider, do I need to understand the concept? Do I need to understand the principle? Be creative with what's being said, or do I need to make sure I don't miss any detail here? Because and so to write or not to write, depending on which is which.
Right, dropping that Shakespeare left, right, and centre. It's great to hear. Yeah. And of course, Craig, a lot of conversations, a lot of communication right now is happening online, on Zoom like this. This is people's brave new world that we're all finding ourselves in. And so that brings its own challenges. And there has been some comments around that. I mean, I know when I'm doing my therapy and coaching sessions online, I have to work twice as hard to feel or to have any kind of sort of empathic connection with the people I'm working with, because if I don't do that, it's just someone on a screen and things get a little bit heavy, sort of an intellectual. We've had yoga teachers and Pilates teachers talking about how difficult it is to get any kind of feedback at all, especially that non-verbal feedback when you're teaching to sort of a Brady Bunch array of just faces. We've got teachers saying, kids are at home, they're trying to teach them meditation or even math, and the kids are just kind of disengaged. And it's a challenge, isn't it? You really have to. I mean, I always just try to maintain an awareness of my own body. That's pretty much how I work with this. I figure if I can feel my body, at least I'm not getting lost in my thoughts. And maybe that's an invitation for the other person. And of course, then moments of pausing, if I'm doing therapy or teaching meditation, asking people to pause and feel their body, but it really takes work, doesn't it?
Yeah, and noticing where the attention is now. And maybe even, having breaks to sort of touch in and sort of say, well, where's the attention now? Or just for kids at home learning, let's just have a little mindful break. Or sometimes the meditation practice can be helpful, but doing a physical activity that demands attention can be very useful as well to kind of reset the focus. But it is more of a challenge, I think, online. I mean, the technology has been fantastic. Especially in the COVID kind of situation, but it at the same time comes at a cost.
Yeah, I think we're discovering as we go what it's good for and what it's perhaps not as good for, and that's a good thing to keep in mind. That it's not bad, it's not good. It just is what it is and works really well in certain settings and not others. And of course, this week we've really started building the basic building blocks of mindful listening and communication. Next week we're going to extend that. So this coming week, it's all about communication, empathy, and relationships, and compassion. I mean, so it's about sort of bringing this mindfulness into all of our relationships, which is such an important thing. So it's really important that we keep practicing the mindful listening skills and the presence and the things that we've been doing this week as that building block. And of course, because this is something that we need to practice over and over and over and over again, it's not something that we can master in a 4-week course.
Oh, wait a sec. I thought we could.
Well, some people are quicker learners than others, Craig. Maybe I'm talking about myself here.
Yeah. I was just going slow. I've been working on it for 60 years. Still a work in progress.
Yeah. So we'd strongly encourage any of our learners out there who to upgrade, because that's going to get you ongoing access to all of the meditations, all of the practices, because these are things that you're going to probably need to dip back into over time and to practice well beyond the 4 weeks. So if you haven't seen the upgrade option, check that out. It also really helps us by supporting the team behind the scenes here, to keep running these courses. So
to make it available and free for so many people, and for those who can afford it, it's really helpful to again continue to make this available to the community. So yeah, that'd be very much appreciated if people consider upgrading.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for your amazing contribution this week, these awesome conversations. Keep them going. Remember, this course isn't designed as therapy. So if you start particularly in the relationship section, or, if this course brings anything up for you that feels like it might be sort of, a bit too hard to sit with and beyond what the course can offer, definitely consider reaching out to a family member or friend, or even getting some professional help just to help you work through some of these things. But otherwise, we look forward to seeing you next week.
Excellent.